Okay. Good evening. How is everyone this evening? Wonderful. Woo! Okay, that's pretty good for 7:02. That's great. First of all, I want to welcome you all. My name is Mark Bunting, and I'm a visiting lecturer here at the Moody College, specifically at the Stan Richards School. And you are at our very first ever Entrepreneurial Keynote workshop, and I want to thank you all for coming. I had a meeting with Dean Bernhardt some months ago, and we were talking about the need to try to build a community around entrepreneurship here within Moody. We have some other colleges on campus that do a spectacular job at that, and we've been a little bit behind in nurturing and supporting the entrepreneurship, which falls in this sort of broader category that we call communications. And so over the course of this semester and next, we're going to have a handful of keynotes. Another one in about 3 weeks from the Chief Marketing Officer of Facebook, Gary Briggs, and some others in the spring. So I would encourage you all to participate in those as well. And again, I want to thank you for coming tonight. Sort of the mantra around this series was to try to bring in some speakers who could really help elevate our discussion around entrepreneurship. And hopefully we could center those discussions around topics that would have real relevance to startups and the idea of starting businesses in this new economy. And tonight's topic, I think, is at the tip of the spear for me personally. I know it is for our guest speaker, and I hope by the time he finishes his lecture, you'll share our enthusiasm for the topic of augmented reality. It is not a sleight of hand. It is not a fancy creative treatment du jour. It is really a sea change in the way in which we communicate that has really broad ramifications for those of us that are in communication, but it even has broader application, I think, for society and business at large. And I think when you get an opportunity to hear Mr. Westcott's presentation tonight, you'll agree that we're on the cusp of something really, really big, and that it is, quite frankly, just a continued march, an evolutionary march of a lot of things that have been happening truly for millennia. And I hope that you'll appreciate the impact that it can have. I personally am a huge AR nerd, and I have been for some time. And your speaker this evening is as well. So you can take our bias into consideration as you hear the presentation this evening, but I feel very confident telling you the things that you'll see and learn about this evening are coming into real reality in the next 2 to 3 years. So without any more warm-up from me, I'd like to introduce and give a warm welcome for Court Westcott. Court? So before we get started, would you tell everybody a little bit about your background, where you're from, what you do, just to help us set context for this evening?
So my name's Court Westcott. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and everyone at my high school pretty much went to UT. I actually ended up at Vanderbilt in Nashville, and I got my philosophy major there. Then after that, I got my MBA at SMU, and after that I worked for a digital surveillance company. That's kind of how I learned about computer vision. Then after that I tried to be an entrepreneur. I was a very bad entrepreneur. My father's a great entrepreneur. He's a Horatio Alger winner. It's pretty cool as someone who is born with nothing and has a lot of success. So I grew up knowing what entrepreneurs look like, and I know I'm not one of them. So I think that makes me a better VC, and I one day discovered AR, and I'm going to tell you all about that tonight, and it's really, really cool.
Yes. It's wonderful that you can start a series on entrepreneurship and your first speaker says I was a horrible entrepreneur. And so if we haven't lost you yet, please stay in your seats. We promise some good things are coming.
Really bad.
In all seriousness, Court works as a venture capitalist, and that's how we got introduced. That in full disclosure, we were neighbors as well. But some years ago, I found Court, who was quickly becoming the leading authority on augmented reality for a variety of reasons, which he'll share when he goes through his presentation. And I didn't know anybody else who was looking at the technology with any seriousness. And so we found a common love of augmented reality and have shared that enthusiasm for some years since. And Court's had some very successful investments in this field. Frankly, the largest, most high visibility transaction in this space was one of Court's deals. And so he brings a tremendous amount of IP on the topic, both in terms of as a disruption in the technology world, but also specifically has great insights on its media application that is near and dear to those of us that are in the world of advertising. So, great. Fair enough?
Excellent.
Okay, and also a full disclosure, Court is neither a business major nor is he an advertising major. So to further discredit him, he studied philosophy, okay? But I think you're going to also tell us why that is actually an important, that liberal arts can be a pathway to entrepreneurship too, right?
Sure. I thought you were going somewhere else with that. I'm glad you didn't go where
you
the other place.
I knew
where you
We'll get to that later.
Okay.
But do you want to go ahead and jump in and drive?
Sure, or whatever you want to do.
Listen, I would like to say this. Approach this with an open mind. You have to suspend a little bit of your current bias on state of reality or augmented reality today, and exercise your creativity a little bit to do a little bit of imagination exercise. That's first and foremost. And second, I would impress upon you just this one sort of basic tenet. This whole idea of augmented reality in its simplest form is simply the overlay of data, information, visuals, but within our field of vision with our hands free. Unlike virtual reality, where we have to operate in a virtual world and we must by default be static, augmented reality is sort of this idea of giving us on-demand information in our field of vision that we can act on in real time. So if you'll think about that as we go through this process and let Court kind of walk you through the evolution of why this is so important and why there's a historical basis for why this not should happen or could happen, but absolutely will happen, I think it'll help frame up what this opportunity can really mean to us as entrepreneurs or as communication professionals. So,
awesome.
Is that enough?
You. Perfect. Excellent.
Okay. Why don't you take the podium and you can drive from there.
Awesome. So, FYI, my talk today is 50 minutes, so I'll be done around 8, and if you guys want to ask any questions, you're welcome to at the end. So here we go.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
So that's it. If you want to make a greater than average impact on the world at any scale, you have to think differently. You have to see the world not for how it appears, but for how it really is. So we're going to do a quick pop quiz. Point to where I currently appear. Come on. Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. The good news is you're pretty much unified in your answer. The bad news is you're not thinking differently yet. And today we're going to be talking about two types of things, mirages and realities. Not this type of reality. And our pop quiz was done to help you understand that every one of us has a false belief about the reality of nature or live in a mirage of some sort. We intuitively believe that our eyes are looking out into the world, but that's not actually happening. The world is looking into us. And whatever you think you're seeing right now, you're not truly seeing it. Yes, I'm standing here on stage, but I appear in your mind. Your eyes are actually receiving the light that's bouncing off me in the stage, and then the GPU inside your mind is reconstructing that into a controlled hallucination, a mirage. Another type of mirage is a Faustian bargain. And so what if I was to make an offer to you all to say, hey, I think I can make you perfect. Okay, not this perfect, but close. Would this be an actual bargain or a Faustian bargain? We're going to find out in a bit. So as Mark said, he reached out to me randomly like 4 years ago, and he said, hey, I want you to come talk to my class about AR. And I was really caught off guard because 4 years ago, no one had heard of AR, especially in Dallas, but now things have changed, right? And I would be very surprised if every one of you don't use AR on some level on occasion. And yes, I'm talking about barfing rainbows and chasing Pokemon. So why do barfing rainbows matter, right? They're just a passing gimmick. There's nothing special about them, is there? They're just fun Snapchat filters we put on there to get likes, right? Well, spoiler alert, things are not as they seem, and AR is much more than meets the eye when you look below the surface. And you guys know this cliche. You give a man or woman a fish for an evening, he's got something to eat. You teach them how to fish, and then they know how to have dinner the rest of their lives. And that's why I don't want to just tell you what I know today. I want to tell you how I know, because that's what really matters. I hope today I can give you some really cool nuggets of knowledge, but there's one thing you can take away from me. I think really one of the most important things we lose sometimes in education, which is really a core tenet of life and learning, is to always have an attitudinal disposition of belief revision based on new evidence. That's it. Just have an open mind and value free speech and critical thinking. In other words, when we have less mirages and false beliefs in our lives, we live less ignorant lives, which in turn gives us more authenticity and control over our external world. And you all may hold other things to be true, whether it's or other fallacies, whether the world is flat or that the Big 12 is as good as the SEC. Whatever it may be, all I suggest to you is that you are open to having your beliefs potentially revised. Because having an attitude of openness may better reinforce that your current beliefs are correct. But whatever way, you will still be closer to the truth. And I'm starting all of this not just because I am a philosophy nerd and an AR nerd, but it's important because this type of philosophy is called epistemology. And epistemology is just a $2 word for how do we know what we know. And it's important we have good epistemologies because if we don't, we're likely to end up with false conclusions. And we're unable to distinguish between the perceived and the actual. And the most reliable epistemology we've found up to now to tell us about the world, it's not paper, rock, scissors, it's science. And science is really cool because it allows us to think differently. It allows us to figure out unseen patterns that are deeper than our fantasies of first impressions and common sense. And it lets us dive down into our true nature of reality. And better than that, science gives us the ability to predict the future. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. You know, the subject at hand happens to be anticipatory computing, but look beyond this and understand that regardless of what industry or occupation you are in or going into, if you want to do something novel, you have to relentlessly question everything, and you've got to tear down the superficial. Because when you break things down to their most basic form and you see how they fit within a pattern, you can know what's coming next. However, the universe is very ironic, and that is why tonight I am going to argue that mirages are our next great step in understanding reality. Okay, so that sentence makes no sense, contradicts everything I just said, but it won't soon. So first, a quick bit about me. Again, I got my MBA, I lived my own mirage, I was a really bad entrepreneur, really bad doer, but I eventually figured out I was a decent thinker. And in 2009, when I was 29, I was at a job that I was really bad at, and I picked up this magazine, Business Week, and I read the term augmented reality, and it changed my life. You know, I instantly felt it into my bones. It's like when you have an In-N-Out burger for the first time, you just get it. You're like, this is amazing, right? I knew these AR holograms were going to change our world, but I could not yet articulate why. I came to understand the why only after I understood the pattern that AR fits into. I'm a huge fan of Peter Thiel's, and Business 0 to 1 is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. And he rephrases my discovery perfectly. Thiel says in order to make a great deal of money, you have to know something that is true that no one else knows is true. You have to know a pattern that no one else sees, and while everyone is looking at the delusion, you must see through it. So back to 2009, I had this gut feeling. I thought I was onto something, so I tried to learn everything I could, and I started to invest in some early stage startups. And I met these two German dudes in 2010 at the first AR convention in Silicon Valley, which was basically just 50 nerds who everyone thought were crazy, especially my friends and family. So you got to remember, this is eons ago in the tech world. The iPhone had only had a camera on it for 1 year. So when I used to tell people, hey, soon you're going to be wearing a computer on your face, they were very concerned for my well-being. But fast forward to May 2015, we were purchased for an undisclosed sum by a little company in Cupertino. So not that crazy anymore. I'm also a seed investor in other AR companies, which include Meta, UbiMax, and MindMeld. And MindMeld last spring was purchased for $125 million by Cisco, and Meta has raised close to $100 million and now has close to $1 billion valuation. So remember this name, Marone Gribbets. He might be the next Steve Jobs. So getting to the subject at hand, AR, computer vision, and natural language processing are really, really big deals. AR is the biggest tech play since the PC. And it might be the biggest tech play since the internet, the PC combined, and mobile. So first we're going to build a really solid foundation to why we got here. And then we're going to talk about what AR really is. And finally, we're going to talk about how AR has been used in business in the past, in the present, and the future. And we're also going to talk about some related subjects such as anticipatory computing, bots, and augmented audio. Look, there's some highbrow philosophical ideas and technical terms today, but besides the importance of patterns and having an attitude of openness, there's 3 other things I hope you take away from me today. It's first is that AR is going to turn us all into the coolest 80s action hero ever, as in MacGyver. Or for most of your generation, it's this guy. And the second takeaway is that daydreaming is a very underrated attribute. We spend so much time in the present and immediate future, we fail to see through imaginary walls of what is just around the corner. The future does not belong to coders, it belongs to liberal arts majors. And in the near future, creativity and critical thinking will be one of the few things we are still better at than the AI at. And speaking of AI, that's my last message. In the near term, you should not be afraid of it, but embrace it. Okay, so enough housekeeping. I'll put the volume back on. We're going to get down to business, so here we go.
So one of the new emerging kind of information technology revolutions that we're seeing nowadays is this idea of augmented reality, right? This notion of taking the world of everyday perception and tweaking it and augmenting it and impregnating perception with mindedness, with agency, with aesthetics, right? And so how do we do that? Well, it essentially means that the information technologies, the instruments that we're using today to manipulate and transform the world are now allowing us to overlay digital information on top of the physical world. They have apps already that looking through the camera in the app, you can place virtual elements into real environments. So it's this notion that you're mapping the real world and overlaying agency, information, gamification, mind into it. So what does that mean? It means that more and more of the world starts to feel re-enchanted. More and more of the world can be turned into gamified experiences. There's more cognitive activity occurring in the interface between self and world until self and world become one. You know, I think that that's where we're heading, and certainly the idea of augmenting reality is part of what it means to be human. From the moment that we started to create architecture, to put objects in the world, to make art, to carve tools, we've been augmenting reality. So for the digital revolution to finally catch up to that is a perfectly natural emergence.
So there's a futurist named Ray Kurzweil. He works for Google now, and he says that our brains are designed to think linearly and locally. But that's not how technology works. Technology works globally and exponentially. And that's why we all have these really bad cognitive biases about how much the world is going to change and how quickly it will. And seemingly out of nowhere, there's this massive tidal wave here today. And it is the most fundamental shift we've ever had with technology. Because for the first time, we will not be adapting to how our technology works, but our technology will be adapting to how we work. And this is not a cute analogy. This is a binary choice. You either learn to ride this thing or it crushes you. So consider today a surf lesson. Experts today believe there have been 7 mass medias and that AR is set to become the 8th mass media. And while it's hard to comprehend, they also think within 6 years, AR glasses will be as ubiquitous as iPhones are today. So why are they so sure? It's because AR is part of a much larger pattern. So the most famous law in technology is called Moore's Law. Some of you may be familiar with it. And what it is the co-founder of Intel discovered that every 18 months, the number of integrated circuits we could put on a chip doubled. So in other words, every 18 months, our ability to process information became twice as fast exponentially. And Moore's Law is how futurists today can make some really good guesses about what technology is possible in the near and far future. But it's not our whole relationship with technology. And today we're going to talk about another law. A pattern we've all experienced, but we've never explicitly recognized it. Most people see the illusion, but there's a heavier truth to hear. And I use this law as actually part of my investment thesis, so we can call it the law of information of accessibility. It doesn't matter what we call it. What matters is that there's a pattern. Particularly that AR, computer vision, also CV, and HMDs, which means head-mounted displays, fit into this long trending pattern, and they're going to disrupt the search engine, and they're going to disrupt every aspect of your lives and every industry. And again, don't be distracted by all this new technology we're talking about today. To really understand what's happening, again, we've got to break things down to their most basic form. We have to ask, what does technology want? What's its end game? And the answer to that question can be found in the eternal wisdom of Mike Tyson. Speed kills. Or as it pertains to HMDs, the co-founder of Google, Larry Page, says, the amazing thing about them is that they reduce the time between intention and action. And that is what technology wants. Technology wants us not only to process information quicker and quicker, but it also wants us to input and access relevant information from our technology faster and faster. So the lag time between our imagination and their instantiations in the real world has become shorter and shorter. In other words, we're moving into our imaginations, and the distinction between reality and them is disappearing. And if that sentence doesn't get you all excited, I don't know what will today. The theme has not been show me the money, it's been show me the information. Everything we talk about today comes down to one word: access. And this pattern is true today, it will be true tomorrow, but now we're going to go back to the beginning of this pattern. And when I mean back, I mean way back, like 500 million years back. In the book, In the Blink of the Eye by zoologist Andrew Parker, he argues the greatest inflection point in the history of evolution occurred because of one particular new attribute: the eye, which single-handedly caused the Cambrian explosion. And it's important to note that this explosion did not occur after the development of the brain, but only the eye. The eye was the bottleneck because the brain could now access external information in real time. You know, our computers have had brains for decades, right? You know, AR is the main story we're going to talk about here today, but we cannot forget, for the first time ever, we are giving our smart devices the ability to see, and they too may be about to have their own Cambrian explosion. So the chart on the left is the number of organisms before and after the eye, and the chart on the right is the internet traffic from the 90s and today. And experts think that AR is at about that 1995 level and is about to have a similar singularity. So what does the eye, the internet, and AR, what do they all have in common? Well, they're all massive breakthroughs of increasingly efficient means of the speed at which organisms summon meaningful data about the external world and act accordingly. And more recently, we have all experienced this law over the last 20 to 30 years. For me, it started when I was in preschool. I was taught the most state-of-the-art way to access information was the Dewey Decimal System at the library. When I got to elementary school, we had desktops and encyclopedias on them. When I got to middle school, we had laptops, making our devices more mobile, therefore more accessible. And then when I got to high school, and probably most of the time you all were born, that's when the internet, the search engine popped up, and that's when things got really interesting, right? Information was no longer isolated and static, and it changed the world. But again, we weren't satisfied. So college, everyone got cell phones, and today we all have smartphones, making the search engine even more accessible. So all these devices are apparitions. You just have to look beyond the camouflage to see what they really are. They're just stepping stones in a pattern of us never being satisfied with how quickly we can access information. Can you hear that, Mr. Anderson? That's the sound of inevitability. But what is inevitable is not always obvious in the present. It has happened again and again throughout history. You know, the shape and the form of our devices continue to morph, but what they are doing does not. So while not obvious, it is inevitable your next smartphone will be AR glasses in 2023. Again, forget the fact you're putting a computer on your face. You are just retrieving information one iteration faster than looking down at your phones. And just like each previous iteration, you're not going to know how you ever live without these because you're going to be more addictive, more essential, and more mentally a part of who we are. Which leads us to the next step in the pattern. Hands-free, overlaying digital information in our view, and it's not a smartwatch where I have to look down and lose the use of one of my arms. It's not part of technology's pattern. I mean, there's many compelling reasons to wear a smart device on your wrist, but an interface is not one of them. So today, you guys can ask me any question. I can pull out my phone, I can start Googling, or better yet, I can stop talking to you all and I can ask Siri a question. And I should be able to access about any random fact you can think of in 30 seconds. So the big question now, is this as good as it gets? Well, let's talk about our search engine, right? It's really powerful, right? It's like a genie. They can answer any question, they can take you to anywhere, and they can teach you anything. But the problem our genie has had is up until now it's been stuck in the bottle. And that bottle is your smartphone screen or your computer screen. AR lets the genie out of the bottle and gives you all the internet's intelligence and information into your real world in real time. Often before you manually query it. Literally anticipatory computing. So now we know why we got here, so now we're going to talk about what augmented reality is. First, we're going to talk about the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. Augmented reality is a very foreign sounding term, so when you later try to tell your parents and grandparents, you're going to get some blank stares, trust me. And the media is also trying to introduce a new term called mixed reality, which is really just AR done at scale. However, VR has been mainstream since the 90s and is widely understood today. VR means just like it sounds. You are no longer in the real world, but you are fully immersed in a virtual world. And very simply put, VR replaces your TV. It's going to be insanely awesome for playing video games, sports, or watching sports and watching movies, but try walking down the street in one of these things. You're going to get made fun of, and you're probably going to fall off a cliff, run into a wall, or get hit by a car. However, the future of AR is just the opposite. You're going to look normal, and it's going to be social. And from my perspective as a VC, it's a great market, VR, but it's going to be so much smaller than AR, and it's much less attractive to me because it's going to evolve more like traditional media models, where people that create the content and own the distribution control the main chokeholds, making it much harder for things to become disruptive, like the internet did. All right. So what is AR? While VR replaces your TV, AR is going to replace your smart devices. And we all have experienced AR our whole life. We just don't recognize it. That yellow line that goes across the screen on a UT game, that's not really there in reality. But by overlaying digital information into our world, it can add great value. And the easiest way I found to articulate what AR is surprise, surprise, a mirage. Everyone knows what a mirage is, right? It's something that appears to be there that's not really there. AR allows you to subjectively customize the world to look any way you want it to, just as long as it incorporates reality so you don't get hurt. You can even change the way the UT tower looks. You don't like the view from your apartment? Change it to the Eiffel Tower. You don't like the color of my shirt? Change it to burnt orange. In other words, you can create an Instagram Snapchat filter for your world as you experience it. And if you understand this, then you guys understand the basic premise of AR, being the main definition being a technology that superimposes a computer-generated image on our user's view, thus providing a composite view. And I'm sorry, guys, but I've got to get meta on all of you. All of these examples in this definition of AR are actually mirages themselves, and that they miss the real value. The real value, going back to AR at its core, is about accessing information faster than ever possible before. Yes, you are seeing virtual objects in front of you, but those virtual objects are just manifestations of information we have never before been able to access in real time. AR is not a revolution because you have a Pokemon sitting next to you on the couch. AR matters because for the first time, AI will be working with us in real time. AR holograms are fakes. They are the Wizard of Oz. What really matters is the man behind the curtain, the AI. And AR is actually not the final conclusion of this pattern. Like, man, it's a massive bridge to our future. But somewhere between 10, 20, or 30 years, AR itself is going to be disrupted by the Neuralink. People are already actually working on it. It's crazy. We crave omnipotence and accurate information. When accurate information can be accessed faster, productivity increases. And that's why we've been striving towards this holy grail. To have our devices provide us with perfect contextual knowledge. You said intelligence earlier, and I like that very much, in real time. AR does not just mean more stuff in our reality, but it means our realities can have more depth here at UT and everywhere else. The entire world now becomes a touch screen. The whole world becomes anointed like the website Rap Genius. However, AR is not a new concept. It's been around for a long time, but most of y'all never heard of it because the technology has been really bad. But the difference is now all those main bottlenecks are starting to disappear, and that brings us to HMDs. AR on your phone is a gimmick. It's only incrementally better. The zero to tipping point occurs when we have the proper hardware to experience AR hands-free at its true potential seamlessly. AR is the most elegant user interface ever imagined because it's the interface of the real world. It's a zero interface. It's the last screen you will ever buy. AR is not the Internet of Things. It's even better. It's the Internet of dumb things. Internet that makes dumb things smart, including its users. So again, if HMDs are so awesome and AR is so great, then why did Google Glass fail? Well, Google Glass failed because it was too early for its time and it contained all three of HMD's main bottlenecks. First off, it was targeted towards consumers. And it was ugly. So if there's a chance you're going to get wedgied on a locker for wearing one of these things, you're probably not going to wear one. It is not foreign for us to wear technology on our faces. We've been wearing bifocals to augment our vision for the last 2,000 years. And if we can get to a point where these HMDs become indistinguishable from normal glasses, there will be mass consumer adoption. Secondly, Google Glass did not have the processing power to do AR. An HMD without AR is like a web browser or a computer without a graphical interface. It has a very limited appeal. And most of you aren't going to get this joke, but AR without an HMD is only slightly better than a QCat. If you want some extra credit, Google QCats. And the last bottleneck had to do with computer vision. Before your devices can do great AR, they have to be able to truly see and map the world. And up until now, the math involved to do this has been impossible. But we are now finally solving all these technical hurdles, and something magical is about to happen. Because the sort of trinity occurs when you combine an HMD, AR, and CV together to give you something greater than its parts, giving us prosthetic knowledge, meaning information that a person does not know but can access as needed using technology. And it's important, we're going to stop here a second. Big statement, controversial. We are going to democratize knowledge. So for the first time in history, information will be accessed so fast via discrete AR HMDs that from an outsider's perspective, your actual knowledge base will become indistinguishable from the prosthetic knowledge that you are communicating or demonstrating. And again, the big takeaway here was MacGyver, right? He was this TV character in the 80s, and he'd get in all these crazy situations and he had very limited resources to get out of them. But he was a genius because whatever situation he was in, he knew exactly what to do. AR makes us all MacGyver minus the hair, because when we put these glasses on, there's nothing we can't do and nothing we can't fix. Think about how revolutionary this is. Only 20% of the world's workforce actually work at desks. AR HMDs will be the platform that enable the death of many aspects of incompetence and ignorance, and will be the birth of mass self-sufficiency and actualization. You know, basic economics, right? Resources have value when they're scarce. So when knowledge becomes ubiquitous, then what skills are we going to value? Our concepts of education and inequality, they're going to need to be reevaluated, because you might be thinking, this sounds bad. It sounds like a Faustian bargain, and society is going to have a great price to pay for this. And the main reason this is scary is because the marginal value of skilled labor goes to zero. So let's unpack this for a moment. I can hire an expert electrician with 20 years of experience, or now I can just hire an unskilled day laborer and there's no need for the expert. Because when I hand the unskilled laborer the glasses, he is instantly an expert. Because when he looks at that electrical panel, there will be a guide telling him what to do step by step. In other words, next time you have to disarm a bomb, there's going to be there's going to be an AR guardian angel on your shoulder saying, hey, cut that wire and don't cut that one, so you don't have to do a YouTube how-to video. And again, you might be thinking this is a bad thing, but it turns out it's not a Faustian bargain, it's a blessing. Because when things become cheaper to make, their price comes down. An abundance of knowledge will lead to material abundance for everyone. So don't listen to the media. There's never been more equality in the history of the world, and things are getting better every day because of technology. Capitalism is the best because it lets technology evolve the fastest and allows Moore's laws to do its magic, which in turn has made every single person in this room, including kids in the poorest parts of the world, all into trillionaires. Because that's the cost it would have taken to put that smart device you have in your pocket the year your parents were born. We are already cyborgs. I know this sounds insane, but our smartphones now have more value than many of our own appendages because they bring us more utility. Which brings us to AI. So a lot of world leaders are really scared about AI. We could talk about that later maybe, but and I could see how someone your age could be worried that AI is going to steal my job. But that is the kind of main reason we need to talk a second about Centaur Chess. So everyone knows that humans can no longer beat computers at chess, right? AI has surpassed us in some areas, so maybe we should be worried it's going to start surpassing us in other areas, like being a lawyer or a radiologist. And I do not suggest being a radiologist, by the way. The solution is to be a centaur. So when humans use AI against an AI, we crush it. So in other words, when we work with AI, AI by itself is no match for us. And that's exactly what's happening with these AR HMDs. By using AI in real time with our own intelligence, it's taking us to higher levels of efficiency and brain power than we've ever had before. And all of this is why Google has invested and others $1.9 billion into a startup called Magic Leap that has no product. And Hololens has been a secret project for Microsoft for a long time. And by the way, the reason I believe, totally speculation, that Magic Leap has this $6 billion valuation is that they are trying to manipulate light with such precision and shoot it into your eyes that that the virtual objects become indistinguishable from real ones. So mind-blowing. So now we're going to turn the volume back on. Now we're going to watch 2 videos real quick about Microsoft's HoloLens.
When you think about how you experience technology today, it's like behind this glass screen. And you're kind of stuck. It feels cold. We've unlocked the screen.
Really what we're trying to do is break down the walls between, technology and people.
This is the next generation of computing. This is the next PC.
It's basically a see-through display that you wear, and it lets you see holograms in your world, in your space, all around you.
A hologram is made out of light, which ultimately allowed us to pour digital assets over the real world so that humans can essentially be entertained and be empowered to do things in brand new ways.
Look around. Technology is all around us. We use it in every aspect of our lives. It enables us to do amazing things. But what if we could go further? What if we could go beyond the screen? Where your digital world is blended with your real world. Now we can. This is the world with holograms. What will they enable us to do? New ways to visualize our work.
I have an idea for the fuel tank.
New ways to share ideas with each other.
How are things going your end?
I just put the images in OneDrive.
Perfect.
More immersive ways to play. New ways to teach and learn.
So put the new trap in the place of the old one.
Now what?
And tighten here and here.
New ways to collaborate and explore the places we've never been.
Look at this formation. Let's take a closer look.
And new ways to create the things we imagine. Because when you change the way you see the world, you can change the world you see. This is Microsoft HoloLens.
What a cool sentence. Again, think differently. When we can change the way we see the world, we can change the world we see. Microsoft clearly blew it on the last paradigm shift, going from desktop to mobile, so they know they can't miss the next. So hopefully I've explained to you what AR is and convinced you these mirages are the next big thing. So now we're going to talk about how it's been used in business in the past, present, and future. Up until now, AR has been used primarily in marketing to either create a buzz about a product, provide additional information about a product, or to speed up a product sales cycle. And a great way to create a buzz is a prank, and any prank you can think of is possible with AR. So now we're going to watch like 10 seconds of volume for this AR commercial. Yep. It's for Pepsi. So tonight, maybe try to think of some other great pranks you could come up with for AR. So again, the world is very shallow. And AR is a great way for people who have found your product in your store to learn more about it. The consumer no longer has to put down the product and pull out the app or go to the internet to get more detailed information, reviews, or comparison. They can get all of that without ever taking their eyes off it. Or even if, instead of even having a product in the store, you can now use AR to superimpose functionality and give the consumer an even better experience. And it's also very useful for online stores as well, because consumers can now try on and experience items virtually. So you can now try on clothes 10x faster than you could in real life, and your friends and family can be anywhere in the world and they can give you instant feedback. So also, what other brick and mortar stores and online stores could benefit from AR? So another really cool way AR has been used up until now, and Matayo's main source of income was to create marketing campaigns for big organizations like IKEA. And a big problem IKEA had was people would go into their stores, they would have all the measurements of their homes, they'd measure the couch, they'd see it, and then when they'd come home, for whatever reason, oops. Mute it. No, sorry. So for whatever reason, when you bring these couches or whatever home to your house, even though you had all the dimensions, you get in there like, man, it's just too big or it's too small. It's hard to get that feel. And this dilemma led to a longer sales cycle for IKEA. So how Matayo and IKEA, they saw this, is they figured out how to put virtual representations of their furniture into your home. So you no longer have to guess how it's going to look like, you know. And I know you all love IKEA instruction manuals, but because of AR, you're going to have to throw them all away. AR makes instruction manuals obsolete, all of them. And this has a material effect to IKEA's bottom line. So what other companies' products could be sped up their sales cycle through AR? However, being devil's advocate, I actually have some real concerns about consumer AR in the near future because of safety. Before we can get to mass adoption, our CV is going to have to be so good that it's going to be able to watch out for us like a driverless car when we're walking down the street. Our HMDs are literally going to have to become our third eye and warn us from danger as we're focused on higher level thinking. And we may get there, we may not, but it's not our only technology. It's not the only thing that's a big bottleneck. Technology is not the only thing. The other thing that's really important we've got to understand is regulation for consumers. And speaking of regulation, we're going to talk about privacy for a moment. It sounds a little Orwellian, but to get to truly anticipatory computing, our devices have to be constantly listening and watching what we're doing to give us the contextual information we want. Without a doubt, there are some major trade-offs here, but for most people, their elected loss of privacy will be triumphed by convenience, because it's going to be too intoxicating, having our needs met serendipitously in real time. I mean, we say one thing, but we do another. But very soon you will have an echo in every room in your home. You know, privacy should have the highest standards, but at the same time, it should be beneficial for you to share. And we constantly hear this battle cry of, oh, privacy is so important and technology is always ruining everything, but it's worn out. There's always initial cultural pushback when a new technology is introduced. And close to 2 billion people already make this utilitarian calculation every day when they use Facebook. The omnipresence that Facebook provides us outweighs our desire for privacy, and the same will be true of the omnipotence that AR is going to provide us. So now before we go into the future and things start getting weird, we're going to spend just a little bit more time in the present. We're going to talk about the most disruptive marketing force created in our lifetime. Well, it's obvious it's our genie, Google, right? Google's the greatest mirage of all time. It's not a search engine. It's the yellow pages. It's a brain. How does Google work? This part's important. You go to a box on Google and you do two things. You type in the object you're looking for, or its concept and its context, and then you press return. Google does its magic and it puts some search results up there, and at the top it puts some sponsored search results as well. However, the barbarians are at the gate, and if the search engine does not evolve to incorporate CV and AR, natural language processing, also known as NLP, very soon it's going to become antiquated, because we are about to move one step further into the post-search and post-app eras. Moving beyond manually entering information into our search engine or manually asking apps to summon us something. In other words, CV and NLP makes our devices for the first time autonomous. So let's take a look at how does CV and AR disrupt the search engine? They do so because of these next 5 words. The second pattern we're going to talk about today. Recognition and context precede meaning or query. And this is an a priori truth for animals, and it's true for AIs and search engines as well. So let's first talk about how you and I create relevance in the real world. Let's say there's an object in front of our eyes. It's obvious that our brain's got to use its eyes first to recognize that object and place it in context. So what are we looking at? Well, I recognize it's a shark. So what context are we in? Are we at the aquarium, behind glass, or is it next to us in the ocean? So only after our eyes have recognized the object, established a context, can our brains query to give us meaning, such as, oh, cool shark, or oh, total meaning. Oh, I'm in trouble here. So this all leads us back to the brain. There is no duality. You know, say I approached a brain that was deaf and blind. I said, hey, I've got these things called eyes and ears to sell it. What inelastic sum would that brain pay to have access to the real world? The search engine AI is similar, that if its sensors have deep learning to consistently recognize untagged data, then those sensors become invaluable. And you can't go the final mile of context without visual and auditory inputs. And CV solves a huge part of this recognition and context problem, but you can't get perfect context without understanding spoken language, and this is done through NLP. And it's going to lead to something called augmented audio, and very soon you will all be wearing a new type of wearable called a hearable. I mean, is there an elephant in the room, or is there literally an elephant in the room? Our brains cannot establish perfect context without them working together. And AR is not bound just to our vision. Our audio is going to be augmented and assisted by AI as well. That's why soon you're all going to be wearing these Apple wireless earpods, because the next time someone says, hey, when was Bevo first introduced? The Siri in your ear will hear that question, will whisper you the answer, and you'll be like, oh, it's obvious, it's 1916. These wireless headphones don't matter because you're not using a cord to attach to a player. They matter because the AI is now going to be living in your ear. And this is a massive game changer, another form of prosthetic knowledge, a decoy. You no longer know who's the expert or who is just repeating what the AI is telling Tim. Oh, I'm sorry, the AI mayor, I thought it said Tim, it said them. You know, today we are living in what is known as the app era. And I know this is hard to imagine, but very soon you're not going to be using apps that much. It sounds like blasphemy, but it's not. Because using a native interface in an app is not the fastest way to access information. The fastest way to access information is through language and sight. So now we're going to look at an example of how using natural language is faster than using an app to shop.
$5.
So voice versus an app. So 14 seconds is an eternity in the online world, and voice is a magnitude of 3x faster than our best apps today. And that's why Starbucks a couple years ago hired MindMeld to start working on their app that should be coming out very soon, which is public knowledge, which allows you to order through voice or through text. And that's why eventually they're going to fire all their cashiers. My children are 6 and 4 years old, and they will be the first generation that does not need to know how to read to query information. Their first and default interface will be voice. And from an anthropology perspective, this is seismic. You see, that's why all the major players, especially Facebook, they're investing in this new type of bot, or new type of AI called a bot, in a huge AR race. And very soon, if your company does not have a CV or a bot strategy, it's going to be like not having a website today. And these bots are going to be living in your messaging apps, and they're going to be on your Echo, and you're going to constantly be texting and speaking with them. They're going to be eavesdropping on your conversations to anticipate your queries. In essence, the messaging platforms are the new rulers of distribution, and they're going to have massive influence on how we market products. CV and NLP companies, they move the starting line and they replace the search engine as the origination point of the query and are the new kings of the jungle. And that's why they have the leverage, because they have the leverage to dictate the finder's fee and beat Google at its own game. The Amazon Echo is the greatest Trojan horse of all time. It's not a speaker, it's not a virtual assistant. It's just circumventing Google and getting their query before Google can ever get it. It's look beyond the sleight of hand. So now let's talk about the future. So our devices already know before we ask them what we want. Well, then how do marketers reach their audiences? And we're going to move away from sponsored searches into something I call a sponsored recognition. So what's a sponsored recognition? So say in the future you're wearing these really cool AR glasses and that Volkswagen knows that you're in the market for a new car. The next time a Volkswagen drives in front of you, it's going to be highlighted in your field of view and it's going to tell you something cool about it. A sponsored recognition. In other words, if you want to win at marketing in the future, you have to understand what a consumer's particular context is and establish what gets recognized. But a lot of people today are like, man, this sounds horrible. It's going to be like this hyper reality or banner ads everywhere. That's not what I'm talking about. These things are going to be tastefully curated and they're going to be sporadic. But still, if I heard this, I'd be like, man, I don't know about that. But think about how Facebook and Google work today. I mean, there's sponsored content all the time they show you, and you don't mind why. Because those sites and utilities those sites and apps give you so much utility for free. AR is going to give us even more utility because, again, they're going to all make us instant experts, which is exactly why you won't mind getting a sponsored recognition now and then. However, for consumers, we are still ways away from mass adoption, but it's not the case today. Enterprise HMDs are in full effect and they are game changing. So that's why our consumer iPhones, they're like, is the music off? Great, okay. Our consumer iPhones are like Swiss Army knives. We demand that they do all types of things, but HMDs, the current state of the art, it's just not ready for that. But in business, it's only got to be good at one thing, and it's also okay if they're not aesthetically pleasing. So that's why 2 years ago I led the first outside investment in another German company called Ubimax, which is currently at full-scale pilot with many Fortune 500 companies like Samsung, John Deere, DHL, UPS. What's happening is Ubimax is going to become the SAP of the deskless worker, making blue-collar workers, or we at Ubimax call frontline workers in logistics, manufacturing, and repair, way more efficient with way less training. So an example would be a picker at a DHL or like an Amazon warehouse. Currently, they're using these handheld computers and they're scanning items, they're looking up and down all the time. But what Ubimax does is they put these glasses on their pickers and now they're just mindlessly chasing dots. So they're not making all these micro decisions and you can train them much faster. These are very seasonal things. So they're 30% more productive, their error rates go down by half, and they're happier. So that's why I am super bullish about specific use case ROI deployment of AR HMDs in enterprise today. AR is not the big short, it's the big long. Because for the first time ever, 80% of the workforce, which are frontline workers, can play Centaur Chess in real time, hands-free, with unfathomed boost of productivity. In other words, this opportunity is 4 times as large as Microsoft Office. But coming back full circle to Pokemon, my current thesis is the Pokemon craze was misguided. It's great that Pokemon brought attention to AR, but its success is actually an outliner. In other words, AR on your phones is the equivalent to dial-up internet. It's not the future. The equivalent of broadband, and the broadband of AR is HMDs. Pokemon through an HMD is not incremental, it's enchantment. And in the long term, the crazy money will be in AR consumer glasses. So around 2020, it's going to be the new 2000. And once the world finally opens their eyes and understands that AR is just the internet and AI in real time, we will have the biggest irrational exuberance bubble, I suggest you Google irrational exuberance bubble, of all time. But up until then, there are so many awesome ways to ride this wave. So the big wave is here right when you all are entering the workforce, and knowing how AR can be used in business is going to be essential. So in summary, I hope I've opened your eyes, heart, and mind and shown you that there are deeper truths out there and that you should not be afraid to change your mind and think differently. And lastly, I hope I've shown you that there's real gold at the end of those rainbows and have also augmented your imagination. Thank you.
Before I open to questions, I just want to kind of dig into a couple of points because this is a lot to digest.
Sure, it's a lot.
It's a whole lot to digest, and I want to try to encapsulate it in a couple of use cases. For me, the simplest one is the example of the, I don't know if it's a husband and wife, where he's guiding her through doing a plumbing repair. And you made a statement about the value of expertise basically being driven to zero. And that can sound, on one hand, to be a pretty intimidating statement.
Sure.
And I think the important thing when we start looking at how we model businesses, it's very easy on one hand to get alarmist and say, well, the poor journeyman plumber who's worked for 30 years and now makes $40 an hour,
right.
You just drove him down to $12 an hour because you could get a day laborer and fix them with glass and they could do a lot of the same jobs that he or she used to do, right? I think it's really important to know, though, historically, when we've had these tectonic shifts in technology, and while it has driven some of those high-skilled jobs out, the productivity more than counterbalances it. So I guess the first thing I like to do is just kind of diffuse the alarmist reaction that this is somehow going to be a decimator of jobs.
It's going to, I mean, it is disruption.
Net decimator, yes.
I don't think net, because when things come down and become cheaper, then everyone is able to afford more stuff. And this is the essence of disruption. I mean, this is the internet. This is the internet part 2 or part 3. I mean, lots of things get disrupted, but every time up until now in history, when technology does that, always new jobs happen. And there's always new things. And right now, you know, that plumber example, that's kind of the current state of the art. The CV is not good to replace the expert, but at least it can remotely assist the person, so you don't have to send them to the location. So.
Right. We had an investment in my venture capital days in a company that was competitive, really, with UBMax. And we were doing also very similar applications where we were sending non-experts in the field in very, very specialized equipment, machinery repair, where it was too expensive to fly an expert around the globe. We could hire lower cost labor, fix them with glasses, and in essence do, by virtue of tutorials or feeding them from an expert somewhere else globally, we could greatly reduce the cost. And so these B2B or industrial applications are happening right now. On the consumer front, particularly as a media model, if we buy in to your evangelism that we're in the 8th media wave, which I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, I'm a full believer.
Awesome.
The ramifications of that are really incredible. Traditionally, these giant sea changes have taken place over many, many decades or hundreds of years. But in this case, we just went through Internet 1.0 in the late 90s, and now we're talking about, in a really compressed period of time, the potential of leapfrogging yet again. So we understand, at least from a historical standpoint, that change because it wasn't that long ago. But the ramifications of this are so dramatic. When you start thinking about how communication from an advertising commercial standpoint is disruptive, if we are all wearing glass in 2021, 2023, the entire media landscape changes, correct?
Unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Okay.
You know, there's a saying, like, if you go exponentially 30 times, you don't go 1, 2, 3, you go 1, 2, 4. The 30th step is 1 billion. And they figured out that they think within the 21st century, we will not advance 100 years if you use 2000 as the baseline, but 10,000. So that's the nature of exponential change. The waves hit faster and faster and faster until you get to singularity. So.
Yes. See, this level of disruption that we're on the cusp of, for someone who lived through .com 1.0 and who spends a lot of time in the venture world, I can't tell you how enthusiastic I am about the opportunities that are right around the corner. And for so many of you that are students, these will happen in probably the first and second incarnation of your career. And so if you have the wherewithal to appreciate this sea change and be a part of it, the opportunities are massive. You know, we spend some time talking about trying to do some daydreaming around how do you take advantage of these changes and create an opportunity. And I love to use the example around autonomous cars. And so we'll go through an exercise about, well, I may not be the one to manufacture autonomous cars, but what's the domino effect from autonomous cars in terms of creating opportunity? Well, I don't know if that means I know for one thing I don't want to do is I probably don't want to be selling consumer auto insurance, right? I might want to develop some expertise around reuse or remodeling of garages, because if we don't own cars, what happens to that space? What can I do to take advantage of a sea change of this magnitude to create value and to create opportunity? And from the media standpoint, if you notice the application for these, what'd you call them, sponsored? Recognitions. It's really no different than what we experience in our social media world to the extent that Facebook understands that I have interest in Texas athletics or that I have interest in foreign cars, whatever that may be. And I get ads accordingly. And I don't mind that trade-off. I don't mind trading a little privacy because they're contextually relevant. They're feeding me information and solicitations that at least are of interest to me. And there's no difference here. So when you saw the one wall that looked a little bit like Times Square with sort of an overload of banner ads, that's not going to be the application. It's going to be far more elegant. And by the way, this is also going to be opt-in, so it's not like you're not going to have a choice. You're going to be able to turn these off. You'll have choice. But the ability to learn how to ride that wave, to learn how to communicate in this new medium, is going to be no less relevant than learning how to communicate in HTML in an internet protocol circa 1994. Okay? I had a company that did a little more than built websites. Okay? That was it, and not very good ones. Rudimentary, ugly websites. And I wasn't even that hands-on. I had 3 or 4 developers. The shop turned into about 20 people. 18 months later, I sold it for $5.2 million. I didn't really know anything about building websites. We just happened to be early guys in a sea change in the media landscape where people were using a new medium and they did not possess the tools to know how to master that medium. And so, to me, AR is this grand new opportunity for many of you who are half my age and then some to experience the same kind of irrational exuberance that some of us had the privilege to live through in the 90s. And it was fun, by the way, just for the record. It wasn't fun when it ended, but it was a lot of fun when it was going on. And I see this opportunity is many factors greater than what I saw in the 90s.
It's so rare for a real paradigm shift to come along, and this is a real paradigm shift. Just one thing on, you're talking about the sponsored recognitions. I see a shirt, it says, it's on sale. I'm like, that's cool. I just bought it. So like you won't be looking at your screen as much. You'll be more involved in the world, and the world will be more subjective as well, which will be very weird, but it's going to be fun. And
by the way, some of this application is happening in a non-virtual environment today. We had a guest at one of my classes who came from Integer, and they had taken a storefront for, I believe it was Adidas. It was one of the shoemakers in Germany. It was a very high traffic retail area. And they had used some AV technology to basically turn the entire front glass wall of the store into an interactive screen. And they were using some recognition technology that as people approached the screen, if I walked up, it recognized and said I was approximately 6 foot tall Caucasian, probably 50-something, thanks. And it would pick selections that had been curated that were more than likely going to appeal to someone of my build, my age, and my color. And so what would happen is as you approach the screen, the models looked like me in clothes that they had done some research would probably appeal to me. And so the ability was that now a complete virtual storefront, I walk up, data suggests that we buy things when the people wearing them look more like us. I walk up, I can see this at 11 o'clock at night even when the store is closed. And with my app, all I had to do was say, buy. Or I could even swipe the storefront. So the idea that it wasn't floating in midair, but the fact that they could take a glass storefront, this virtualization, we're just on a march. And this will be the ultimate incarnation of that when it can be on demand, in our field of vision, with our hands free.
I agree. I would just add, we didn't talk about it much, but kind of the bridge technology for consumers is projected AR, and that was kind of what you're describing is before, on your phone, it's just not that great. It's not going to ever move the dial, but before we're wearing these glasses, stores are going to be they're already doing it at Walmart, it's a Dallas-based company, where instead of putting a Nest in the store or an Echo, they just 3D print like a piece of plastic, and then they superimpose functionality. So now you can't steal the Nest, and it has all the functionality. You think you're playing with the Nest. In addition to that, you can interact and do all this cool stuff. Could you tell everybody
what a Nest is, just in case?
Nest is like the wireless, it's the Google home air conditioning thing that's smart. So like whatever, it doesn't matter what the device is, but like any type of device that people might steal or might not understand intuitively, you can now superimpose the augmented reality so you can like add more value than you'd actually see just
a virtual
having the
Nest.
Device. Yes, a virtual Nest.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
It's a big deal for Walmart because of shrinkage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Not to be an alarmist, but
sure.
You mentioned that this access to this technology democratizes knowledge.
Correct.
So I can assume that anybody could be a doctor or a surgeon because they would have the information in front of them. So my question is, what would be the value of education and college in that reality? And also, does this mean that there has to be a tandem growth in just like disrupting the way we look at education?
Long story short, Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think a doctor's an extreme, right? But let's say you and I are in some remote location and someone needs like a tracheotomy, like there's no doctor, like I can have the power to probably look at the deal and a doctor can walk me through it. So, but doctors can also be more efficient because they could reach people they might not be able to meet. But in terms of education, like I kind of said, is like creativity, critical thinking, that's what you really want to be good at, because you're going to be using AI and you're going to be that's the one thing it can't really do better than we can do at. I don't want another thing to say on that. But yeah, it was the GitHub example. I don't remember if you saw that. So GitHub is, I don't know if you know what, any of you are coders in here, it's like the depository of code. If you have code, you upload it in there and other coders can use it. The CEO, that's all they do is hold code. He said last week, he said, you know what, the future's not learning code, it's going to be speaking language. So it's not about how technical you know how to manipulate the website, it's going to be how creative you can be thinking of what that website could be like. So yeah, things are going to get weird, and a lot of things like radiologists, like you don't want to be a radiologist. Like you can be an interventional radiologist, you probably have a career for a long time, but a traditional radiologist, CB it's already beating it.
You mentioned about the hyper-reality a little bit. If I'm a company and I see, I feel like that would happen just out of the fact that, like, if I was a company, I would want to be seen in that aspect or in that that setting, and so they'd be willing to sell any sort of like inch or any sort of little thing that I see out of my virtual glass. Isn't that?
Well, sure. So it's kind of the same problem like any social network would have. Of course, advertisers, they want to show you stuff all the time, but if it's super annoying, you're going to throw this thing in the trash. So a really great social network or user interface ecosystem knows that, and they know, hey, we can push some stuff, but we can't push it all the time. So maybe like 3 times, I don't know what the number is, 10 times a day, you open up your fridge and they're like, hey, drink some Coke today because whatever. And so us as consumers, we will make that decision for them. That's why you don't see like pop-up ads that much anymore. They're so annoying, we don't put up with them. So that's why I don't think we're gonna get to that dystopia.
So going off the whole education and the fact that these people who essentially have no training can be experts at whatever they choose to be. It seems to me like you're pointing towards a universal basic income. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would like to get your thoughts on that.
Sure, I mean, that's a deep subject that we could talk about later. It's a great question, I think a very relevant question. But yeah, I don't know if you have to get to that. I mean, we could value like art more or acting and whatever, music, those could become more ways we earn our money. But yeah, things get weird. There is a depression of income because of this. So I don't know if you get to universal basic income. A lot of people think you do. A lot of people think you don't. I don't think we're there anytime soon, because I think, like, yeah, people are going to lose their jobs as plumbers, but you guys are going to be like making the apps to make that plumbing thing work. So I don't think we get there yet, but there's another type of technology going on a real quick tangent called AGI. That's actually what I'm working on now. It's the next generation of AI, and then that totally gets us to basic universal income. So because all jobs go away. Yeah.
So kind of in the business field, how do you see this used particularly in like supply chain management, like in warehouse optimization and warehouse picking, like competing with, like, once the technology gets to that level, would it be instead valuable to just use robots that are doing the picking?
Sure, it's a fantastic question. So things that are repetitive, that you're doing over and over again, robots are really good at. But things that are, so there's two ways in computer vision to do something. You can either recognize what's called a tagged object or an untagged object, right? And when things are tagged, that means you have like the CAD file and you know exactly what it looks like. But like our brains, we can draw a picture of a bird and know it's a bird. Computers today can't recognize a drawn picture of a bird. They don't have the intelligence to do that. So things that aren't repetitive, that are small and weird, like grab 3 erasers out of this box, things like that, and you're constantly ordering all the crazy stuff we order from Amazon, not there. But what they're doing today is they're using those Kiva bots to bring the shelves to the picker, and then the picker wears it and can do it even faster.
Got it. So you speak about how the most important skills are critical thinking and creativity, but
and how computer science and coding isn't necessarily what's going to be most important, but the creativity and critical thinking are soft skills. Do you foresee there being new hard skills that are the most valuable? And do you think those hard skills even exist yet, or
Knowing how to make good AR, make good AI. Yeah, I mean, AI knowledge is a great place to be. Go ahead.
So over the past couple of months, we've been starting to see people use social media and social technologies in order to manipulate or in order to control people. How do you feel like this technology is going to be used in that effect, and what do you think we can do in order to prevent or protect people?
Yeah, it's a great question. You want to start?
No, I don't have an answer. I'm hoping you do.
Well, I could say something darker that, you want me to say, go darker or not? Okay. Well, first I'll say the less dark thing is that, yeah, like, we're already seeing this is happening. The CGI is going to be so good that we can put Trump up here and he can be like, and you think it's Trump talking. So like things are going to get very weird. We won't be able to distinguish what's real and fake, and that's going to be very problematic. This is weird, and I wouldn't tell the other classes during the day. But if you look at the history of technology, there's one media that leads all technologies. It's happened with the printing press, it happened with magazines, it happened with the internet. What's the first thing that always comes?
Pornography.
Pornography. So it's very scary, actually. I'm really concerned how this is going to be, because you can do some really weird things. You use your imagination with AR. And so it'll be, I don't know. We have all these privacy laws. You and I, when we're talking, we've got this social contract right now. I know you're not filming me, and I'm not filming you. But when we have these glasses on our faces with cameras, it's like, it's awkward, right? And it's going to take a lot of time for us to figure that all out. So that's why I'm like, consumer use is amazing, but it might take a long, long time. So.
Where do you see?
No, you're sorry.
Okay, cool. So going back to that privacy thing that you just mentioned, where do you see the intersection between augmented reality and blockchain? Because like that whole thing seems like decentralized, like exchange of permissions to me.
That's a great question. I'm not a blockchain expert, but I see web articles occasionally on it about AI. I know there's a lot of AI and blockchain working about trying to decentralize AI because it's important from a security measure, but I don't know what they are. But it's a good question. It's people are talking about it. Yeah.
I just have to wonder about like how does it work with hacking, like, and how people are going to like mess with your field of vision, since you're mentioning how CGI is going to get to that level.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very scary, but any technology that's connected to the cloud has that hacking problem. I mean, this would be a bigger problem if you're driving down the street, and we won't be driving down the street, but you're walking down the street and someone takes a wall out of your field of view, right? So, yeah, you want these things to be really secure, but I think we overscare ourselves about how likely that's really going to happen. So it's an issue, but I think it's a solvable issue. Yeah.
So like AR on the phone, you said is like dial-up internet.
Yeah.
So is glasses, like you've been mentioning glasses a lot, is that just kind of like the first major product like into AR, and then there's different types of platforms after that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so the progression goes glasses, contact lens, throw away the contact lens, throw away the glasses, just pipe it with nanobots inside your brain to the cloud. So that's the Neuralink. That's actually what Elon Musk invested in this year, and people are working on. So it sounds crazy to me even too, but like they're working on it, because it won't be prosthetic knowledge; it'll be actual knowledge. So you really can be like the Matrix, like I'm a ninja, I'm a doctor, like bam. Go ahead.
I'm a graduate student in the theater program, and I'm working on a thesis to do with augmented reality and performance, and how those things speak together and work in concert to merge a physical space with a digital one. I'm really curious right now, because it seems like a lot of the applications of this are really more towards business and marketing. Do you have any technologies that you see really bringing the creativity to the forefront? Any like apps or like software? 'Cause it seems like with my research that I'm not finding a lot of stuff to do with the creative aspect of being able to like put your process in the real world.
I think you will see a lot more of it. There's a company called PTC that bought Matteo's competitor they own Euphoria, and they're doing some kind of cool stuff with models. But the company I mentioned, Meta, I highly suggest you try to get your hands on a Meta 2. They're actually fairly affordable, and they are really the first AR headset that is the dream we've all talked about. So yeah, I think there's going to be more and more applications. The biggest bottleneck has been that the HMD. But I mean, what Meta's focus on is like the pro consumer, which is like architects, artists, modelers of shoes and stuff, like who work in 3 dimensions. So things you design in 3 dimension, that's going to be a great spot for AR in the near future.
So it's going to be a little bit not as like technology based as all the other questions have been, but I'm working on a piece about net neutrality, and so then this makes me wonder how does this play into that, because that's something that's kind of like up in the air right now.
I mean, to the extent that everyone gets information equally, I think you'd want it accessible in real time, right? I'm not going to go into like pros or cons of net neutrality, but like, I mean, yeah, if I can get it quicker than you, then it's probably not that fair, right? I mean, but that's a governmental question, but a good question, yeah.
You spoke about your investment thesis. One of the things I think, one of the cornerstones seemed to be access. Could you speak to the rest of it?
Well, it really is those 2 things. I mean, I just saw very on that, hey, that like these phones aren't the only thing, and I went to this conference and I saw that, hey, these glasses, they're actually, the funny thing is like at UBMax, we're not even using augmented reality to be, that demo I showed you actually is our next gen stuff. Today, we're just info snacking. We're just putting the information of where the box is in the corner of our eye so we don't have to look down. So we're not even towards that access of actually chasing the dots. So yeah, it's kind of evolved over time, but the big thesis is that consumer's really cool. Don't think about it now. Now you'll not drown, but you'll in a desert, run out of water. It's a long ways away. But for enterprise, like for problems we can solve today, hands-free, that's what I'm really focused on. That's really interesting. And then also natural language processing, things that we can apply natural language processing to instead of using apps. I think there's still a lot more opportunity for that. And we can go into that later, but it's, yeah.
Court, on this, you make this point about democratization of knowledge, which we all would hope would translate into democratization of opportunity, right? And I think the thesis is that would happen. And I don't think it's rose-colored glasses to talk to that point. You use the extreme example of having the intelligence to be a physician on demand. I don't see that, to me, that is an outlier as well. Mm-hmm. What I do see is I see that bucket of lower skilled labor who have mastered a craft over time. And if there's repetition involved in that craft and it can be easily instructed in a hands-free environment, that's where the initial major disruption happens. And so the other side of that equation is when we talk about the plumber losing his or her opportunity, what we're not talking about is people are working so much more efficiently in that environment that it's not just a race to the bottom on wages, but in reality it should be a rising tide that lifts all boats, because we're able to do more plumbing at a more efficient rate, which creates opportunity for the laborer base who might not have had that opportunity before. And by the way, they're probably not getting $10 an hour as a day labor anymore. Their income is rising significantly because of the enhanced capabilities that they have by virtue of glass. And also, so all of this is binary.
And the other side of the coin is you, the consumer, right? I got to take my computer to the Apple store to get fixed, or charge me $200 to put some RAM in or something. I'm like the least technical person in the world. I don't have to do that. I just download the app. And I think in the short term, medium term, yeah, it isn't all wage deflation. I mean, I think there is, the expert, if you're really good at something, people will want to pipe that in or at least help you design the app to do it.
Well, the $200 I save on RAM and the $200 I save on plumbing goes back into the economy and purchase goods and services, which creates other jobs. I think the point that we need to stay focused on is its disruption, but it does not necessarily come with a net loss of opportunity.
Correct.
It will to some certain groups as they are displaced, but that transition is always happening.
Correct. Overall, it's a great thing.
You talked about business applications for this. I'm wondering about social change applications, and are there companies out there that are taking advantage of this for social change?
So give me an example of social change.
Well, for example, if there's something, groundwater, for example, if we have the Edwards Aquifer and a lot of that can't be seen, and if people could understand what was happening underground, they would make their decisions based on the science rather than not being able to make a decision because they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is the internet, right? I mean, the internet's a great way to maybe communicate that way. You can put some diagrams on there or whatever, write an article, and people can get a hold of it. This is just even better than that. So now you and I can have a conversation right now, and in between us, the aquifer's right here. And you could say, hey, let's go down 300 feet and let's experience it right now. Or you see where that street pole line is? If you look in the files of our sewer system, you can see right under there, there's the main highway of our sewer, whatever. Yeah, I mean, the implications are endless. Whatever industry. I mean, there's companies now working on the tools to make this gold rush happen. I mean, and so if you were interested in that, you could buy a tool from Apple that's called ARKit. And you could use that technology to tell that story, or you could hire like an advertising firm to create that experience.
I don't think there's any firm specifically focused on social cause as it relates to this technology, just because it's so emerging.
Not yet.
I think as to Court's point, right now, kind of all the focus on the consumer side, it's around the development of the headsets. So we're all kind of waiting for the next gen headsets that will bring some of this capability that Google Glass, frankly, didn't deliver. But all the action's kind of on this industrial side. The picking example for UPS that he showed, that's where they can get some real ROI and some real capital return. And so that's where all kind of the action's happening today.
Along those lines, what did we learn from Google Glass, from the Google Glass fiasco?
Well, we learned that you need AR, and it can't be ugly, and then it also has to be able to really see. So those are all the three things that Google Glass did not have. So, if you target it towards someone in a warehouse where it doesn't matter what it looks like, and it's not that good at much, but it can just access information just a little bit faster, it's got value and people will pay for it, and they're doing it today. Because now if I have 10 people at a warehouse, I can fire 3 of them because the 7 people are now that much more productive. Going back to the point of the aquifer, like, our brains were storytelling machines, right? And like, this is such an awesome medium to tell a story. And like whatever story I'm articulating right now with my words, we're going to be able to express what we're talking about so much better because of AR. Because we think 3-dimensionally, right? And everything we look at now is in 2 dimensions. So we're going to have these awesome 3D examples, and it's going to be so much better.
Yes.
Do you foresee the current tech giants like Facebook, Amazon, Google being at the forefront of this, or do you see the companies that you talked about today usurping?
Very excellent question, very relevant question. We talked about this in the other 2 classes. And it's important because historically, when paradigm shifts happen, the incumbents always blow it. They're always like, oh, we're the newspaper. Like, who cares about the search engine, right? Or we're Walmart. Like, but that might not be the case this time because, Microsoft saw themselves lose mobile. And so every single big company, they're working on this stuff. And they're spending a lot of money. And I don't know. There's a couple really cool incumbents, Meta, UBMax, ODG. And they're trying. There definitely will be some really cool new startups that come from this, but the big guys aren't asleep at the wheel this time. So.
Court, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
I really appreciate it. This is terrific. 2 things. First of all, we have 2 gifts from you. This is a book on the history of the University of Texas, which is signed by many members of the Stan Richards School of Advertising. And this one is not from the university because they're not allowed to give alcohol, but I got you some wine.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it much, Mark. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it. Dude, that's really good.